again.
It is noon and Joaquin Pasolento is just waking up. 10 minutes after lying in bed with his eyes wide open, he gathers the strength to sit up. But I went to bed at 9 p.m. Why is it so hard for me to get up? He mentally asks himself. He manages to get up and slowly goes to the bathroom where he pees and drinks some water from the faucet. Then he walks from his bedroom to the living room, a complete mess. He almost steps on a box on the floor with a sliced pizza, bitten in different parts. There are clothes, magazines, newspapers, and several pairs of shoes laying on the floor. On the coffee table there are dishes, glasses, an ashtray full of cigarette butts, and some empty beer cans. He feels really hungry and goes to the kitchen with the hope of finding something to eat, opens the refrigerator door, and all he finds is a banana. So he returns to the living room. He turns on the TV set, then the telephone rings. Pasolento looks at it, trying to decide whether he should answer or not. He fears it may be some bank, reminding him that he is behind in his credit card or loan payments. It could also be Mrs. Manison asking him to pay the rent. In the end, he decides to answer because it could also be from one of the many places where he has applied for a job and they have said, "Thank you very much for coming to the interview, Mr. Pasolento. We will call you." Hello. The deadline is on February 15th. Remember that if you do not pay your utility bill for 2 months, your services will be suspended. If you have made your payment, please ignore. Joaquin hangs up, while the female robotic voice is still speaking. He takes one of the newspapers, goes to the kitchen, peels the banana, and, while he eats it, begins to read the classified ads looking for job offers. So many job interviews and nobody calls me. Supposedly, we all have the right to a decent job, was Joaquin's thought. Yes, but remember how many times you have blown it and made them fire you. His conscience comments out loud. This can't continue. Next interview, I'm going to cause a real impression. Why am I such a moron? The only job offers left were for salespeople. The rest were all taken. Joaquin didn't want to work as a salesman. He had already had bad experiences doing that kind of work, like the time when a dog ran after him several blocks and, even though it didn't bite him, it tore the leg of his pants. Most days were a waste of time, spending money on bus fares, going from one way to the other without selling anything, and arriving home exhausted. There were months when commissions were so low that they didn't cover the expenses. That is, if he had stayed home, at least he wouldn't have wasted his money. However, he knew that his situation was exasperating, so he called the first number he saw on the newspaper. They gave him an appointment with the head of human resources for the following day. Fortunately, it was 10 a.m. and Pasolento arrived punctually. Good morning, Mr. Pasolento. My name is Eva Lopez. I am the psychologist of the company, and I am in charge of doing your job interview. Joaquin looked like a real businessman, a totally different person from the day before. His clothes were impeccable, not even a wrinkle. His curly hair was combed and his nails neat and clean. You wouldn't have recognized him. Pleased to meet you, ma'am, answered Joaquin, extending his hand to greet her. Your full name is... While she looked at the papers Joaquin brought. Joaquin Eustaquio Pasolento Grisales, he replied. It seems that on my father's side, there were indigenous ancestors. That explains my last name Pasolento, which is quite unusual, he added with a smile. Very well. You are from Calarcá, 36 years old, and are you married? Pasolento remembered former interviews in which he said he was single and lived alone since he was 22. Yes, I have had a wonderful wife for 12 years. Her name is Lorena. When Pasolento was 12 years old, he fell in love with a girl called Lorena. She was the love of his life. When he grew up, he had a few girlfriends, but he never really fell in love. His real love was that girl. It took him 2 years to have the nerve to talk to her, because she was one of the prettiest girls in school and the most popular in his class. The only contact he had had with her in all that time was a kick she gave him on his bum when they were playing robbers and thieves. She was the police and he was a robber who didn't see her coming from behind him. To his surprise, the few times he spoke with her, she had been kind and smiley. After doing much thinking about the topic, Pasolento invited Lorena to go out. And again, to his surprise, she said, "Okay, but I can't arrive home late." They wrote through Facebook and they agreed that he would pick her up at her house and go together to a shopping center nearby. Pasolento was quite nervous. He arrived very well dressed, with his hair combed because his curly hair was usually quite disorderly. Everyone said to him to go and comb his hair, but he didn't want to. Once, playing secret friend, a girl gave him a comb. Everybody laughed and Pasolento got so angry that he threw the comb in the garbage can. This was the second time in his life that Pasolento remembered being so neatly dressed. The first one was for his first communion. Now he was carrying a bouquet of roses and a box of chocolates. Lorena looked very pretty and happy. It was Pasolento's happiest day. Soon they were at the shopping center. They were going to eat something and then to the movies. Pasolento had already made the reservations, so they didn't have to make a line and they could get good seats. They were at the food section looking to see what they wanted to eat. Pasolento asked her what she wanted. At that moment, Lorena heard she had a message on WhatsApp. She looked at her cell phone and then said, "I want a hamburger with French fries and a Coke. I'm going to the bathroom." Pasolento bought the food and sat at the table. He didn't want to start eating until she came back. Even though he would love to take a bite at the chicken, his favorite dish, he didn't want to seem impolite. He waited several minutes and Lorena didn't show up. This made him worried. He went to the ladies' room and shouted her name. Nobody answered. He decided to go inside, thinking that she could have fainted and was lying on the floor. What would he say to her parents? But Lorena wasn't there. A lady coming out of the toilet, buttoning her pants, shouted at him, "Get out of here, you pervert!" He looked for her all over the shopping center. Finally, he understood that Lorena had stood him up. "And do you have children?" the psychologist asked. "Mr. Pasolento." Joaquin, coming back from his memories and stammering a bit. Children? Yes, I have 2, a boy and a girl. The boy's name is Pablo. He is 13. And the girl's name is..." On the wall, he saw a diploma which said the psychologist's complete name, Eva Luciana Lopez. "Luciana, she is 11. "Really? My second name is Luciana." "There you are. All the Lucianas I know are pretty." "Thank you, Mr. Pasolento," she responded with a smile. "And this address is in what neighborhood?" This time, Joaquin put his sister's address. The other times he had given the address of his house, but now he was willing to do or say anything to get this job. It is in Belén, Fatima, ma'am. Good. We prefer our employees to be heads of family and live in safe neighborhoods. Yes, ma'am. My wife is a physiotherapist, and thank God I have done well in the world of sales. In the condo where we live, there is a pool and a playground for the children. When my children arrive from school, they have lunch, go to the swimming pool or play around. Then they do their homework, have dinner, and go to bed. Let me congratulate you, Mr. Pasolento. I see that you have a nice family. Joaquin's memories came back again. With a last streak of hope that maybe something unexpected had happened and Lorena had had to leave the shopping center without telling him, Joaquin went to her house looking for her. Now she's not going to be there either, and I'm going to worry her parents, he thought. Pasolento imagined her parents telling the police that Lorena, the disappeared girl, had left with him to the shopping center and never came back. He imagined himself walking into jail, terrified. Bah, don't think foolish things. He knocked the door and her mother opened. Pasolento shyly began to ask, "Is when he was immediately interrupted by her, who, with a tender voice, said, "She came in a few minutes ago saying she wasn't feeling well. She vomited several times and now she is asleep." Pasolento didn't know what to say. He didn't understand anything. She looked fine at the shopping center. He wanted to see her and talk to her, but he didn't say anything. "Go home now, and you can talk with her in school tomorrow," her mother said. With a sad voice, as he turned around, he said, "I hope she will recover soon." The following day, everybody was laughing at Pasolento in school. He didn't understand why. One of his classmates said, "How are you doing, Pasolento? Did you see the video that is now viral in Facebook?" "What video?" "Look at it." On the way to the library, a young man from a senior year said to him, "Poor dummy." Pasolento wondered if the video had to do with him. He was anxious to see it. At last, he sits in front of a computer, and when he opens it, he sees himself knocking at Lorena's door with the roses and the box of chocolates in his hands. Then he sees himself at the shopping center standing with Lorena. She goes away, he buys the food, and walks carrying a tray with 2 dishes and 2 sodas. He looks happy and smiling. Then his expression changes and begins to look everywhere. You can see him walking all around the shopping center, and finally he is walking quickly down the street, even running a bit, and then you can see him walking slowly with a sad face. At the end of the video, in capital letters, "Frustrated date." "And what do you do in your free time, Mr. Pasolento?" The truth is, Joaquin did nothing but sleep, eat, and watch TV. But he knew that that answer would do him no good, so he answered, "Well, I try to share with my family all I can. I go to the swimming pool and the playground with my children. I also go to the gym because I have to reduce a few kilos. I try to eat healthy. That's why my wife prepares delicious salads for me." Talking about his supposed wife, Pasolento remembered. Lorena didn't go to school that day. He supposed she really was sick until he tried to talk with her through the social media and discovered she had blocked him. He waited until the weekend went by. On Monday, he tried to approach her and ask her what had happened, why she had done that, but one of her friends stopped him and, in an aggressive manner, told him that Lorena didn't want to talk with him and not even think of getting near her. Pasolento suffered the rest of the school year and then changed to another school. He and Lorena never spoke again. "Do you have an addiction? Do you smoke or drink?" asked Eva. "No, none. I have never smoked. I drink a little in social reunions. Do you prefer to work by yourself or with a group? Pasolento remembered having been asked that question before, and he had answered that he liked to work alone. I prefer to work in a group. I'm a very sociable person, and I believe 100% in group work. The psychologist nodded, smiling. As you know, the position you would be hired for is as a salesman. Do you like sales? Yes, of course. I know that many people do not like to work in sales, but for me, it's a passion. It's like a game. Every sale is a challenge. Very well, Mr. Pasolento. My 25 years of experience tell me that you are the right person to work for our company. This week, we will do the paperwork necessary for you to start working on Monday. Pasolento knew everything about the procedure, so he had arranged with his sister and some friends to say what they had to say when they were called. Everything was in order. Pasolento signed the contract and began to work the following Monday at 8 a.m. However, that day he arrived late, and he began telling lies and creating all kinds of excuses. He didn't get along with his workmates and found a place to smoke without permission. He was truly bored. However, they never fired him because, since he is an excellent liar, he managed to sell a lot. Miss Lopez began to suspect that she made a mistake with Pasolento and began to discover his lies. She went to his house and found out that he lived in a shabby old house. There was no such thing as a new condominium in Belén. The next day, she called him to her office and told him that the company was going to celebrate its anniversary with a party for all the employees and their families. She said it was mandatory for him to go with his wife Lorena and his children, Pablo and Luciana. Pasolento thanked her without showing any problem and said to her he would be there with his family. We'll see how you're going to get out of this one, thought Miss Lopez. The next day, after a long, hard day of work, Pasolento went to the supermarket and, while he was looking at the brands of some pasta products, he heard a female voice asking, "Pasolento?" He turned and saw Lorena, whom he recognized immediately. She is more beautiful than when she was 12, thought Pasolento, and laughed at himself for having such a stupid thought. Trying to hide his anger and his happiness, he replied with an inexpressive, "Hi, Lorena." They said hello as if nothing had happened. She told him she had married, had 2 children, but her marriage only lasted 5 years, and that 4 years ago she had divorced. Now she was working as a general practitioner in a hospital. He told her he hadn't married, that his parents hadn't had the money to pay for his university, and that he was now working for an important company in the sales department. "Pasolento, I owe you an explanation." He tried to make her believe he didn't know what she was talking about. "Explanation? What about?" "Well, what happened in school when we were 12 years old." Don't worry about that. That was a long time ago. I have already forgotten." "Well, I haven't." With some smiles and a bit shyly, she said, "That event was even the topic of one of my confessions. The priest made me pray, but I feel I haven't been forgotten yet." Pasolento looked at her with surprise and laughed. "That's school stuff. Although truly I always wondered why you left. In the end, I suppose that you knew they were going to film us, and that was why you accepted my invitation. I hated you for that, although I still have doubts as to what had happened." "No, I didn't know they were going to film us. Supposedly nobody knew we were going out. My friends were surprised that I had accepted your invitation, and I made them promise they wouldn't tell anybody. I never knew who was the one who told about our date." She asked him to have a cup of coffee with her. They sat at a table, and she continued, "When we were at the shopping center, I got a message from Eugenia, my best friend. It said, Lore, don't go with Pasolento to the mall. I heard the guys found out that you two were going, and they are going to do something bad. What are they going to do? I couldn't find out. You know how it is when you are so young. You pay too much attention to what people say. I wasn't sick. I ran to my house and said to my mother to give you any excuse in case you asked about me. Well, said Pasolento with a low voice and looking down at the floor, at least I now know what happened. The truth is, I would have appreciated very much an explanation on your part. I am truly sorry about what happened, and I ask you to forgive me. Remember, we were only 12 years old, and I didn't know how to handle the situation. Don't worry, Lorena, it's all in the past, and we were just kids. Tell me about your children. What are their names? How old are they? They are what I love most in my life. Their names are Pablo and Luciana. Pasolento couldn't help spitting out the coffee he had in his mouth. He looked at Lorena appalled. He got up and looked around. Is this a joke? Are they filming somewhere? Lorena looked at him with surprise, without understanding anything. You know Eva Lopez, don't you? Eva who? Who is she? Pasolento looked at Lorena and realized it wasn't a joke. Slowly, he sat down again and smiled. This must be a dream, he thought. I'm sorry, I think I have a trauma, and for a moment I thought this was a repetition of what happened in the past. Lorena laughed and gave him a warm hug. Of course not. I am so happy to see you again. I am happy too. Tell me, how old are Pablo and Luciana? Pablo is 13 and Luciana 11. Pasolento's eyes shone again. Can I ask you a favor? Yes, of course. Anything you want. I feel light after having told you everything, and I thank you for your understanding. It is a pleasure for me to do you any favor. Just tell me. Would you and your children come with me to the anniversary party of the company where I work? Of course. Then we can give ourselves a second opportunity. Pasolento smiles.